In this module, we will look at some more ways that you can modify your page and improve its appearance with CSS3. Let's start by talking about fonts. There are a number of different types of fonts. The three important types that we'll care about are serif fonts, sans serif fonts, and monospaced fonts. Serif fonts have those tiny little legs at the bottom that make reading easier, especially in large paragraphs. Among the serif fonts that you might consider are Times New Roman and Times, Georgia, Baskerville, Palatino, Linotype, or you can just mark a fallback of type serif. Sans serif fonts do not have the tiny little legs and are very good for headlines. Among the sans serif fonts that are popular are Arial and Helvetica, Verdana, Geneva, Tahoma, Lucida Grande, as well as Trebuchet MS, Century Gothic, or the generic sans serif. Monospaced fonts are excellent for code. Among the popular monospaced fonts are Courier New, Courier, Lucida Console, and Cooperplate. All of the use of fonts depends on the font being available on the user's computer. However, that can be overcome with web fonts. With web fonts, you instruct the user's browser to download the font that you need to the user's machine. However, this creates somewhat complex code and can raise legal issues as to the ownership and licensing of the font. One easy way around that problem is to use a font server such as Google Web Fonts. Using Google Web Fonts turns out to be fairly easy. You navigate to Google, pick the fonts that you want, request the code, which is a set of links, and put those links into your style sheet, and then you just use the fonts as normal. When you use the fonts, they will be downloaded to the user's machine. Let's take a look at how that works. Let's return to the example that we've been working with. Here in Opera, you can see that the fonts are all uniform, and that is not surprising given our decision to set the whole page font family to Sego UI. Let's comment that out for now, and we will start up at the top with the paragraph font, and we'll give the paragraph font a font family of a serif font, which is supposed to make reading paragraphs somewhat easier. We'll then go to our header, and we'll give our headers a sans serif font. And we'll take that and apply it as well to our header too. Since we don't override it in the footer paragraph, it will inherit the paragraph style. We're not overriding the font family anywhere else, so we should be ready to go. Let's save that, bring back Opera, update, and you can see right away that the paragraph fonts are now serif, and they have those little legs or extensions on the bottom of each letter. You can really see that distinctly if you look at the U in About and compare it with the U in About HTML5, where the header is sans serif. To get started using web fonts, we turn to Google Fonts at google.com/fonts. You can search by name. You can search categories. Let's take out display and handwriting, and search only for serif and sans serif fonts. And you can set thickness, slant, and width. In addition, you can choose whether you want Latin, Cyrillic, Greek, etc. We'll stick with Latin. You can choose the preview text that is shown to you to describe the different fonts. And you can choose the size to examine those fonts. And there are various ways to sort the fonts. There are, as you can see, many fonts to choose from as we scroll down through this list. Once you find a font that you like, you have a number of options, including adding it to the collection. And that adds that font family to your collection. Some font families have only a single style. Others have multiple styles to cover such things as bold and italic. We can review the font we've chosen, and if different weights are available, we can set it at different weights. We can have it look like a headline, or we can have it look like a paragraph. And we can move that to full size as we narrow in on what we want. Another very nice feature is the pairings feature, which indicates to you other fonts that are often used with the font that you've chosen. Returning to the main page, we can click Use. This indicator on the right shows about how long it will take to download this font on your page. That is the impact that this font is going to have on the load time of your page. Scrolling down, we see the instructions on how to embed this code into your website. And below that, how to use the font in your CSS page, complete with an example. Notice that the instructions on how to add the font to your page have a standard tab, which uses the link, which must be added to each CSS page, or the import directive, which can be used just once, or the JavaScript, which can save time but can be enormously complex. We'll use the standard, mark this and copy it, and then we will return to our code. And notice it says copy the code as the first element in the head of your HTML document. Being obedient, we will go ahead and do that. And let's break that up so we can read it. So we have a link with an href to the Google fonts. It tells what family we're choosing right in the URL. It has a relationship equals style sheet and a type equal text CSS. This type is not needed in HTML5, and so we can delete that. We're now ready to use that font as the font family for our paragraphs. If we go back to the Google Fonts page, it shows you how to do that. Let's copy that code. And again, return to our style sheet, and we'll copy that code right into place. Save the page, bring up Opera, update our page, and there's our font in use. So even though this font is not on my machine, it's able to very quickly download it from Google Fonts and integrate it into my page. There are a number of things that you can do to make the text on your web page stand out more, pop, and generally be more interesting. One of the simplest things you can do is to vary the font size. You set the font size using EM or percentages, and M is a printer's measure. And for purposes of CSS, 1M equals 100%. So 0.5M is equal to 50%. You can also set the font size using pixels or using keywords such as small, medium, large, extra large, and so forth. You'll also want to adjust your text by setting the font color. There are a number of ways of doing so. Two of the most popular are RGB, where you pass in a hexadecimal value where the first two characters are the red character from 00 to FF, and then the green, and then the blue. A more powerful way to do so is to use RGBA, which works just like RGB, but adds an additional value between 0 and 1 for opacity, where 0 is completely transparent and 1 is completely opaque. So you can have a little bleed-through of an image behind the text with 0.9, or a great deal of bleed-through with 0.1 or 0.2. You will, of course, also want to set the font style, setting such things as italic and bold. And if you don't want italic or bold, you can reset it to normal. Capitalization can be done automatically in CSS using the text transform. And you can set your text to uppercase, lowercase, or even capitalize, which will capitalize the first letter of each word. You can use font variant to set small caps, and you can use text decoration for underline and overline. If you want to take precise control over your fonts, you can set the kerning, that is the space between the letters, by using letter spacing or word spacing. And you can set the leading, that is the space between the lines, by setting the line height, which can be set either to a percentage or to a fraction. Let's take a look at a little of what you can do with fonts. You'll notice that we've already done quite a bit of jazzing up of our text by using color and font sizes. In the paragraph we have font size medium, in H1 extra large, in H2 larger, and we've set the color of our headings. We set the footer font size to extra small. There's still more we can do, of course. We set entry meta to italic and author to normal, but we haven't played with capitalization. And see if we have an opportunity for using small caps. How about the header? Here's a list of books I just read. That seems like a candidate for small caps. Let's return to our page, find that line, and that's in the entry content section. But we're going to need to add a class to the paragraph that we want to make small caps. So let's call this entry header. With entry header as a class, we can go up to the styles and add yet another class. And in that class, we can set the font variant to small caps. Save the page, return to Opera, update, and there we have small caps giving a nice subheader effect to that area. I'd like to tighten up the leading. Returning to the HTML, we see that the paragraphs where I want to tighten up the leading are in entry content. Let's go up and create a style for entry content. And in that, we'll set the line height to 0.8. Save that, bring back our browser, and when we update, we get a much tighter line height, but just for that one area. If we feel that we've overdone it, we can go back and set that to 0.9, refresh, and get a little bit more room. We now turn to a discussion of margins, borders, and padding. And to understand these three concepts, we really need to explore one of the key concepts in CSS3, and that is the box model. To a CSS3 developer, a paragraph is just a box. An image is another box. In fact, each tag is a box. And the page consists of boxes within boxes and boxes next to boxes. The margin is the space that separates one box from another, while the padding is the space between the border and the contents of a box, and the border is the line around each edge of the box. We can get a picture of all of this by looking at the content, which is surrounded by the top, right, left, and bottom padding, which in turn is surrounded on all sides by the border, which in turn is surrounded by the top, right, left, and bottom margin. Tags can be thought of as block level or inline. Block level tags typically have space before and after them. Think of the paragraph and div tag. Whereas inline tags, such as strong or emphasis or an image, do not have a space above and below. You can apply both padding and margin to all of these tags, but the inline boxes do not have top and bottom margins and padding. Let's take a look at borders. You can set individually the border top, bottom, left, and right. Or you can set the border all the way around with a single entry. This entry sets a 2-pixel border that is solid and black. You could have broken this down by setting the border width, the border style, and the border color. On a related note, you often want to round the corner of a box, and you do that by using the border radius. Let's take a look at working with margins and padding and borders. To get started looking at margins and borders, I've made a few adjustments to our styles to simplify the styles and the page. Let's take a look at the page as it stands right now. As you can see, I've turned all of the text color back to black and removed the line spacing, the leading that was crowding up the list of books. Otherwise, it's pretty much the way we left it. Our whole page tag affects the body. Let's come in here and make a couple more adjustments. We've set the font size to 18 and the color to black. Let's change the margin so that we have a margin for the top of 20 pixels, which will push the top down just a little bit. And then let's set a margin on the left to auto, which allows the browser to determine the margin on the left, and we'll do the same thing on the margin on the right. Let's also set the width of the body to 750 pixels and put a border around it of 3 pixels. We'll make that a solid border and we'll set its color. Let's take a look at the impact of those changes by bringing back Opera and updating. And you can see that it has put a black border around the entire page. It has put a little bit of a margin at the top. It has automatically managed to equate the margins on the left and the right given the size of our page. And that makes for a tighter look for the page entirely. Let's add a shadow effect to the border. The first two values, 0, 0, indicate that the shadow won't be offset to the left or right or to the top or bottom. The 5 pixel value is the spread value. This pushes the shadow out 5 pixels around all 4 edges. And the RGBA sets the color, but also sets the opacity to 3/4. Let's look at the effect by bringing up Opera. You can see the shadow effect is subtle, but makes the page stand out. Let's do a little work with our heading. We scroll up and find the H1, which already has its font family, color, and size set. We can center it with the text align, and let's add some padding. Save that, and bring back the browser. Watch that H1 heading as we update. And you can see we've given it a little bit of room around the background, as well as centering it. We can adjust the spacing between the H1 and the line that follows by changing the margin. Remember that the margin is listed in left, top, right, bottom. And while negative values make no sense for text size or even for padding, in margins they can be used to tighten up the box model. Let's bring up Opera and refresh, and you can see we've been able to tighten up the header. We'll talk a good bit more about using margins and padding when we talk about float and creating floating boxes in our web page. In this module, we discussed fonts. However, it must be admitted that one could do an entire course on fonts alone. We also discussed web fonts, which allow you to have the user download the fonts that you need. And we looked at how to do that with Google Fonts. We took a look at jazzing up your text in various ways and the implications of margins, borders, and padding, and how you can use them to improve the layout of your page.